Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Joe.
And this is CrimeDivers.
Hello everybody, welcome to
Season 4!
I
The
know.
first episode of Season 4.
Can you believe it? It's Season 4.
I know.
So-
Although I have enjoyed the break.
Yeah, it was nice to have a wee break. I kind of pretty much did nothing.
Yeah, me too. Not a lot.
Did some research, obviously. Wrote up a couple of cases, so we're organised. But apart from that, had
Yeah. A nice break from true crime.
a nice break from true crime.
But
so,
I am ready to get
Are you ready to get
diving
going?
back into the true crime.
Yep. So today I am going to take you to Tasmania.
Oh, we're flying our wings.
We're going down under.
We're going down under.
Yeah, and do you want to know the title?
I think we do.
Well,
What's
you
on
didn't ask me, so I'm telling you.
Well, you didn't give me a chance to ask you.
It's called An Open Secret.
Ooh, good title for the first episode.
I'm taking a bow.
I was going to say, I hope the case is very interesting.
Well, they're always interesting.
Well, some more than others. Shall we dive in?
Yes, let's
It's like I
dive
forgot
in.
how we do these podcasts.
Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about one of the greatest failures of justice in Australian criminal history.
Okay.
So this case is about Lucille Butterworth. And before we get into it, I'm going to read a message which is on a monument to Lucille from her brother James, because she's a victim.
Right.
There's a monument put up for her,
Mm-hmm.
and her brother James, who unfortunately is now passed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is the inscription on it.
Right, okay.
And it's called An Evil Shadow. The darkness of this place where you're lying will never cast a shadow on your beautiful face, nor dull your memory. You were the brightest soul, never given a chance to grow old, but rest in peace, my Lucille. You will forever shine brightly in my heart and memory. He may walk free, but while there is breath in my body, I will pursue the justice he so deserves. I would love the chance to dance with you again, see you smile again. I don't want to say goodbye. My little sister, you are a beautiful rosebud, not allowed to bloom. Your ever-loving brother, James.
Oh.
So the stone for the monument was actually taken from the West Hobart Quarry because their grandfather, Tasman Butterworth, was killed by a fallen rock there.
Oh, wow.
So James thought it would be fitting to use a stone from the quarry for
Right,
the
okay.
monument.
Oh.
So,
It's nice, but it's a shame that they've had to do that,
yeah.
obviously.
So, and as he said in that, as I said, James is passed now.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, while there's breath in my body, I will pursue the justice. And he did. He pursued justice right until the end.
Oh.
So anyway, I'm going to tell you a bit about this. So Lucille was born in Hobart, Tasmania on the 18th of March 1949. Her mum was Winifred, her dad Bruce, older brother was James, and her younger brother was John. Lucille's upbringing and childhood appear to have been happy and unremarkable. She was close to her family, especially her mum. So when Lucille finished school, she started modelling and she got a job at the TV station in Hobart. She started her relationship with a man called John Fitzgerald. He lived in the town of New Norfolk, which was about half an hour's drive away from Hobart. Lucille would go and stay with him regularly. So on the 25th of August 1969, 20-year-old Lucille was dropped off at a bus stop in Claremont, which is a few miles away from Hobart, by her friend. She was getting the bus to a Miss Tasmania fundraiser in New Norfolk and then was going to John's afterwards.
Right.
And she was actually planning on competing in Miss Tasmania the following year.
Oh, so she just wanted to go and check out.
Yeah, I think so, probably. She was obviously ran in those circles.
Yeah.
So she'd been planning on driving to the function, but her father thought it was too dangerous driving on the dark, lonely road, so he told her to get the bus instead.
Really?
So,
I'm thinking maybe it would have been safer to go in the car.
well, obviously, because it's a true crime case.
Uh-huh.
So, unfortunately, after she was dropped at that bus stop, she was never seen again. So, the bus that she had wanted to catch was late, and police think that she thought that she had missed it.
Right.
So when a car pulled up, she accepted a lift.
Oh, no.
So the following morning, which was the 26th of August 1969, Lucille's little brother John was sort of ready to head off to school when the phone rang. So he answered it, and it was John Fitzgerald, Lucille's boyfriend,
Yeah.
asking if Lucille was there. And John had said no, and shouted for his mum to come and talk to John.
Uh-huh.
So she had said, obviously she thought Lucille was with John.
Yeah.
And he said that she wasn't there and, hadn't came back last night, and she immediately knew something was wrong. And she started to collapse, and John actually managed to catch her before she hit the ground.
Right.
And he'd said, it's okay, Mum, it'll be alright, we'll find her.
Mm-hmm.
So they immediately reported Lucille as missing to the police. This was so out of character for her, but unfortunately the general consensus in the police was that she was a runaway.
Ugh.
I know. That if you know it yourself, if the family knows that your child or whoever it is has never done that before, if there's no reason to suspect that.
And she was 20.
She was 20, yeah.
So she's not like a silly little girl, you wouldn't think. I mean, she's not, might still have a bit of immaturity about her being 20, but if she was planning to go to her boyfriend's house, I mean, that was arranged, and it clearly is very out of character that she didn't make it to her destination, then you've got to take that really, really seriously.
See, that's why I don't understand, why the police used to do this a lot. They would treat them as runaways, and it's but if there's no reason for that person to run away, why are you treating it as a runaway?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are clearly, sadly, many other reasons why they have disappeared.
Yeah. So in those days, there was a Missing Persons Bureau, which was a single officer stationed at Hobart headquarters, and it was months before Lucille's disappearance was investigated as something other than a runaway.
So for months, they would have been totally in limbo, her family not knowing what's happened to their daughter.
Yeah. It was 7 months before the police even went to the Butterworth's house and looked in her room. That is ridiculous.
What have I always said about missing people?
I know,
the most important
few hours. Well, I mean, just drawing on my own experience, when my daughter was a teenager, I don't know, maybe about 13 or something like that, and she texted me and said, "Don't worry about me, I'm just going to my friends in Aberdeen to stay for a few days." And, obviously we were like, no you're not.
No.
And when we tried to get a hold of her, she didn't answer. So we phoned the police and reported her. Well, we reported her as a runaway, obviously, because we knew she wasn't missing. She was as a runaway.
Uh-huh.
But the police came within an hour. The police were at her house and looking in her bedroom. So for them, Lucille was reported as a missing person, and it was 7 months before they came to look at her bedroom.
That's awful.
That is ridiculous. And just if anybody's interested, my daughter was running away because she was getting bullied at school, and she wasn't going to Aberdeen at all. No. She was somewhere else, and we found her the same day. Yeah. And she was taken by her. She was taken to the police station. The police picked her up. Her auntie went and picked her up and then took her to her house, and we went straight through there, got her and dragged her home, and took her to school the next again day. Yeah. And everyone was fine ever since. Yeah. Reported the bullies and got it all sorted. Yes. So don't run away. No, I mean, I know it's hard because I don't know what it's like to be in the police force and to deal with the millions of cases that they deal with every year, thousands, whatever. But surely you still have to. I mean, 7 months to me is still unacceptable. Like that's. I mean, it's completely unacceptable. To 7 months later, when they've not there's been no trace of her. Because I mean, runaways, I'm sure a high percentage do come home within the first few days. There obviously are ones that do probably run away and are never seen again. Yeah, because we do know that happens. But you've got to at least do a bit of investigating. Surely, don't wait for 7 months before you even go to the house and look at her bedroom.
I'm not saying that would have saved her. I mean, because obviously at this moment I don't know what's happened to her. But.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Like, the fact is that they didn't know where she was, what had happened to her, and they took them 7 months to even bother to try and find out what happened to her. Yeah. And that's just ridiculous. It is. So, Lucille's brother James said that they just wouldn't listen to them. Like, they knew that she wouldn't have run away. She had a good job, she was in love, she had only taken enough clothes for one night.
They must have felt really helpless and just frustrated because nobody was The police weren't helping them.
And they knew that something had happened
And
to
for
her,
7
obviously.
months, every day they would have got up, and every night they would have went to the bed going, where is she? What's, worrying about her.
And they were probably out looking for her themselves.
Yeah, and then probably thinking up the worst case scenarios of what's happened to her and everything.
Yeah. So, like, as I said, they knew that something bad had happened to her because they knew that she wouldn't have run away. And her dad said it came to him in a dream. He said that he woke up one night and he was choking. And there was a white light in front of his face and a red one outside the window. And he told his family that Lucille had been murdered. He knew, but he just came in like he knew that she'd been murdered.
Yeah.
So eventually police decided to get their asses into gear and take her disappearance seriously. So they turned their attention to New Norfolk, the town where Lucille was headed.
Mm-hmm.
So they found a view about a former policeman turned taxi driver, John Gannon Lonergan. He had a history of picking up women from bus stops and sexually assaulting them. Lucille's family said that she wouldn't have accepted a lift from him because she didn't know him. They believed, I mean obviously they wouldn't have known 100%, but they believed that she would have only got in a car with somebody that she knew.
Yeah.
So the chief investigating police, the chief investigating officer, Inspector Orb Cannon, was so convinced that Lonergan had murdered Lucille that he refused to investigate any other leads. This guy deserves a good kick up the
Well, I'm not being
arse.
funny, but I understand if you've got a strong bit of evidence, a strong lead that points you in the direction of the person, you obviously have to go and investigate it, like maybe as your first priority. But if there's other things alongside it, surely you could still be checking them out, maybe not as thoroughly as the one you believe is the lead.
That's called doing your job properly.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like,
this guy obviously wasn't doing his job properly. If he's like basically got tunnel vision towards one guy.
Yeah.
And the case against Lonergan stalled when police investigators were unable to place him near the Claremont bus stop where Lucille had gone missing from. So it wasn't as if, like you just said, if you got a strong lead, it wasn't as if they had a strong lead. They just knew that he had a history of picking women
so
up
they
from
just
bus stops.
thought they'd connect the dots and think that was the...
Yeah, was it say like added 2 and 2 and came up with 5?
Yeah.
So over time, police, they did identify a number of suspects and interviewed, obviously not that guy, but the other ones.
Yeah.
They interviewed them and in some cases searched their houses and cars throughout the 70s and 80s. But no arrests were made and Lucille wasn't found.
Oh, so it's just gone on like years and years and years.
Yeah, so Lucille's dad died in 1984 and John, or the youngest John, he actually said that his dad died of a broken heart, which that's awful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find out when her mum died, but I did see something, it was a report in 2003, and I'm sure it kind of said something about they wanted to find out for their mum's sake. So I'm kind of thinking maybe she was still alive in 2003.
Right, okay.
So I don't know. I'm not sure when she died.
Mm-hmm.
But they had left instructions for their ashes to be scattered on a rose garden across the road from the bus stop in Claremont.
Right.
And they lived in hope till the very end. And our mum had said, quote, "Someone may talk and we'll have something to put it to rest. A little bit of peace of mind instead of the wandering," end quote. And it's just heartbreaking to know that they lived the rest of their lives like that. They both died not knowing.
Not knowing what happened.
Yeah. So for 41 years, nothing was achieved by the police. And then in June 2010, or 2010, I don't know which way to say it.
I would say 2010.
Okay, 2010. The year 2010, in June. Detective Inspector David Plumpton arrived at the Glenorchy CIB, which means Criminal Investigation Branch, because I had to look that up because I didn't know what CIB was.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And he said that in the 60s and 70s, like, everybody knew about Lucille Butterworth, you know. Like,
yeah, the name, everybody knew her name.
Yeah, everybody was aware of sort of what happened to her. And he decided he wanted to reopen the case. He wanted to
investigate
it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So he was asked, after looking at the file in 2010, what conclusion could he draw from the file, and he answered that Lonergan was the number one person of interest, and more than likely he was the offender.
Right.
And there was another name in the file, and that was Jeffrey Charles Hunt. So this guy, Jeffrey Hunt,
Mm-hmm.
He had murdered a lady called Susan Knight, who was a car salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
So in July 1976, Susan's body was found buried underneath a pile of heavy logs, some light timber and some rocks. And Jeffrey Hunt had arranged for Susan to bring a car to him, because, you know, car salesman.
Yeah.
And he took her into the bush and raped and beat her to death. He was caught and he admitted it as soon as he got caught. Like, he was in the back of the car.
Yeah.
Didn't get to the police station before he'd admitted it. So
Right,
he admitted it straight away.
Uh-huh.
So in his formal interview, which, as it was in 1976, it obviously wasn't recorded, but it was like typed up on a typewriter.
Right.
So obviously this is what the new detective is looking at in the file. So, yeah, it was typed up on a typewriter by Detective O'Gary. Not quite sure. I think it was O'Gary.
Right.
Detective Dillon, who was interviewing Jeffrey Hunt, had also worked on Lucille's disappearance, which was 7 years before that.
Yeah, right.
And there was something, he just said there was something about this Jeffrey Hunt that sort of took him back to Lucille's disappearance.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked Jeffrey if he could help with the case of Lucille as well, and Jeffrey said, yes, I know all about that. And he went on to say that he had picked her up from the bus stop because he knew her. Mm-hmm. So she accepted the lift, because remember, the family said she would only accept a lift from somebody she knew.
Yeah.
And she did know him. And on the way to New Norfolk, on the other side of this place called the Lime Kilns, he stopped the car and something just came over him and he grabbed her and tried to kiss her. And obviously she was like,
Get off me.
Get off me, yeah, struggled. And the next thing he knew, he said he had his hands around her throat, strangling her, and he killed her. So he said he got out of the car and carried her body towards the nearby river and dumped her body there. Not in the river, but like sort of at the side of the river.
Uh-huh.
And he freely gave all that information without being sort of probed and, you know, they basically just said, do you know anything about it? And he just came out with all that. Yeah. And the detective said that he seemed quite relieved to get it off his chest, and it was like, as if that's why he was telling them, because he just wanted to get it off his chest.
Like he'd already knew he was in trouble for this murder, so he might as well just get that off his chest.
So, I hope you're prepared to get annoyed. So they had this confession, but they needed their boss to sign off on it. So who did they call? Detective Inspector Orb Cannon, who had been in charge of the original investigation back in 1969.
But let me guess, he was so focused on the other guy being it that he dismissed it.
He was the one who was fixated on John Gannon Lonergan and refused to let go even when he couldn't charge Lonergan. He still would not, even though, you know, as I said before, he couldn't place him, he was still fixated on him. And so even when he had Jeffrey Hunt's confession, he didn't accept that. It was this other guy. So Detective Inspector Cannon went into the interview room, and he was in there for quite some time, eventually came out and said to the officers who'd heard the confession, you've got it all wrong, he's not talking about Lucille Butterworth. So Detective Dillon went back in, and when he came out, he said, yes, he's still saying the same as what he told us. He's still confessing to killing Lucille. So Orb went back in again to do another interview, and apparently it was completely against proper practices, as I'm sure you can get, because you know, I was like, surely that can't be right, you're not supposed to do that. And he came back out and said that Hunt was unable to assist.
Why would you
basically,
do that?
the confession was never recorded. And it would have gone unnoticed to this day if it wasn't for Detective Plumpton, because he'd met with O'Gary and Dillon in 2010.
Right, okay.
So, because he hadn't, I actually made a mistake there, because I said he was reading the file. He didn't read all that in the file, he didn't know about that.
Right.
He only knew about that because he met with the two detectives and they told him.
Right, okay.
So if he hadn't met with them, then he wouldn't have known about it. So, it was then that it said that Hunter confessed. So what had been written in the file was what had been written in the file was that Hunt had been spoken to in relation to Lucille Butterworth, but as unable to assist, and it was signed by Jeffrey Hunt as well. So Detective Plumpton had no idea that he had confessed just by reading the file.
So the Hunt guy that confessed must be thinking, bloody hell, what have I got to do to get convicted of another murder that I'm confessing and they're not believing me?
Oh, like, imagine confessing to something that you've done and you're not getting believed. I mean, I mean, there is people who do confess for whatever reasons when they haven't done it.
Yeah.
But...
Well, I feel like he's telling the truth.
It seems like he's telling the truth,
like
doesn't it?
But yeah.
So this confession was an open secret with the Tasmanian police. And when Hunt confessed, there were 5 more detectives outside that interrogation room. So when O'Geary and Dillon came out and told Cannon about their confession, they all heard it, because they were, there was 5 people outside that room, so they were telling them about the confession so all these other people could hear. Yet for nearly 40 years, not one of them said a single word about that confession.
So even like her family obviously didn't even know about it or anything.
No, it was an open secret within the police, but not out with the police.
I mean, I'm not being funny, but I do wonder what other cases across any police, in the world, what other open secrets there probably is, because there's probably a lot.
There'll be loads.
There'll be loads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once Detective Plumpton discovered the botched confession from 1976, he obviously needed to prove that Jeffrey Hunt had killed Lucille.
Yeah.
So by this time, because 2010 we're in, Lucille's body still hadn't been found, and Hunt was back in the community. He'd been released from prison after serving 24 years for the murder of Susan Knight. So at least he got done for that.
I know, but potentially could have still been in prison if they had believed his confession and he got extra years for that murder.
So Detective Plumpton convinced the Tasmanian coroner to hold an inquest into Lucille's disappearance, but he needed a brief of evidence. Lucille's boyfriend John Fitzgerald lived in Station Street, New Norfolk. So this is back when Lucille went missing. And he ran a general store with his dad, and they had a flat above the general store. So just down the road in the same street lived Bill and Mavis Hunt and their 6 kids. And 5 of those 6 kids, including Jeffrey, because that's what his family were talking about, were albino. Right. And in a small country town, they really stood out. And I would have thought it would have been quite tough for them, because obviously they would have looked different to the other kids. And apparently, Jeffrey, even as a kid, he was strange. Right. One guy who grew up with him said that people would just feel uncomfortable, just passing him in the street. And if you went close up to him, you would feel the hair on the back of your neck go up. He just didn't feel safe around him.
Just had that effect on people.
And Jeffrey Hunt, he actually worked in a Fitzgerald store. He would stock shelves or work out the back, and he would be seen driving the delivery van. But yet later, he denied that he worked there.
So do you think that's how he knew Lucille then? From
that's how he would have known him, but he denied working there later.
But surely there must be a record of him working there, isn't it?
Maybe not back in those days. What about the 60s? You might have just got paid cash in hand for delivery drivers and working just
True.
What's the word? Stocking shelves and things like that. They maybe just...
Yeah, that's true.
Well, if you think about paper boys and paper girls, just get cash in hand. Or they used to. I don't know if they still do now. They did when my daughter was a paper girl.
Did they not take any of our details and stuff or record it?
Well, not really. I mean, they would know her name and her phone number and her address and stuff, but that doesn't mean to say that it's written down on record anywhere.
No, that's true.
Because, taxes and stuff.
True.
So there mustn't have been any record that they could find anyway.
Right.
Because then they'd be able to prove it, wouldn't they? So he also denied that he knew Lucille, but apparently he would watch her when she was sunbathing in John's garden, and she would go inside because it made her feel uncomfortable. She would call him Whitey. That's why I mentioned that he was albino.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I'm surprised she must have got in the car with him unless she was just that desperate to get where she wanted to go.
Well, she probably didn't think him... probably didn't think he would do any harm. Just because you maybe don't really like somebody or... it doesn't mean you wouldn't get in the car with them. You wouldn't expect them to do anything. So that's just why I mentioned that he was albino. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have mentioned it, but it's just the fact that she called him Whitey. Right. And John told her not to call him that because he knew that Jeffrey didn't like it. So, maybe there was a bit of... He didn't like her because of that, because of being called Whitey. True. So, which she shouldn't have been called that.
She shouldn't have been calling that.
But yeah, I just kind of want to point that out, just because it could factor into the reason why he killed her, or if he killed her, you know. So anyway, so it mattered to the police that Jeffrey Hunt knew Lucille because that gave her a reason to accept the lift from him.
Yeah.
So police had another very good reason to investigate Hunt back in 1969. It was well known in New Norfolk that as a 16-year-old, Jeffrey Hunt had been accused of molesting a girl at the train station. So I'm kind of wondering if she knew that, because then I would kind of think that she would have had second thoughts about getting in the car with him.
Yeah.
But it's thought that he wasn't punished for this because his dad had friends in high places, you know, who sort of protected him, protected the family.
Yeah.
So, so Detective Plumpton's team had a lot of work to do around the bus stop in Claremont. They had to prove that Jeffrey Hunt could have driven past there on his way home, obviously about the same time as Lucille disappeared. If they could do that, then they could put a strong circumstantial case before the coroner.
Yeah.
And Detective Milhouse, a key member of the team, did just that. By trawling back through the files and all the paperwork from the 60s and 70s, he discovered that Hunt had been driving a family car in and out of work. Obviously, he wasn't working at the store at this time.
Yeah.
He was driving a car that a witness described as being present and stopping at the bus stop. So somebody actually did see this car stopping at the bus stop.
Okay.
For whatever reason, this wasn't investigated at the time, but now that they weren't they weren't relying on an apparent confession, they now had Jeffrey Hunt, a known murderer, stopped at the bus stop. Lucille was at that bus stop prior to this car stopping, and Lucille not being there after the car left. So that sounds like pretty
compelling evidence to me.
So with this new information, Detective Plumpton and his team believed that they had all the evidence they needed. So in 2014, or 2014, I'm going to keep doing that.
I know, because before you had 2010.
Well, John says it should be 2014, like, or 2010 or 2011. I would usually say 2014. I'm saying 2014, right? I'm going to stick to that, like 20.
Right, okay.
So in 2014, they made their move. They arrested Jeffrey Hunt on suspicion of murder and took him to the police station. So 45 years after Lucille disappeared, Detectives Plumpton and Milhouse sat down to formally interview their chief suspect.
And it would have been recorded this time.
And it was, because I actually did see a little bit of footage from it. So when asked about John Fitzgerald, he said, "I do know of him, but I never saw him much." And the detective said, "But you used to work at the Fitzgerald store." And he's like, "No, I didn't." So he totally denied that.
Yeah.
And he also said that he didn't know Lucille. He was shown a newspaper with Lucille's disappearance in it, and he asked, he was like, "Oh, when did she go missing?" And like, no, I don't recognise her. You know, like totally denied knowing
after
her.
spending 24 years in prison and not getting charged with that murder, he probably didn't want to admit that, because he probably at the time he thought, well, I'm going to prison anyway for this other murder. So thought, well, why not? But now that he's done his time for that murder, came out, he probably didn't want to go back, so wasn't he going to admit to...
To me, that's exactly what's happened. Yeah. He denied driving home in that area every night. He said that he would only go through Claremont when he used to get the bus before he bought his first car. He said that he was on the bus that day in August 1969. He said he didn't get his driver's license until December of that year. But the police knew that was a lie, because obviously there's records of when people.
I was going to say there must be records of that, surely.
Yeah. And it was actually December the year before, 1968, that he got his license. So,
right.
Yeah, liar, pants on fire. So it was shown a photo of a car that was similar to the family car that Jeffrey's dad had bought back in the 60s, and Jeffrey admitted that yes, he drove a car very much like that one. His dad didn't drive, so Jeffrey was the only one who drove this car.
Right.
The witness across the road from the bus stop in Claremont reported that the car he saw that stopped and picked up Lucille was a car exactly like that one. So, yes. So now they just had to prove that it was Jeffrey driving the car on that night.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they couldn't, and they couldn't get a confession out of him, so they had to let him go.
Right.
So as they still didn't have Lucille's body, the police ordered a dig. So on the 6th of July 2015, they started to dig up an area north of Hobart in an attempt to find her remains. Although a lot of bones were found, they were animal bones and not Lucille's. So there's still no body, and the coroner's inquest was approaching. But then Detective Plumpton received a phone call from an inmate who served time with Jeffrey Hunt in prison. He told the detective that Hunt had confessed to him, and then not long after, two other prisoners came forward and said that Hunt confessed to them as well. But these 3 prisoners didn't know each other. They'd all been in prison with Hunt, but they'd all been at different times.
Right, okay, yeah. So it wasn't like they were like together.
No, yeah, it wasn't like they were all ganging up together and saying,
oh,
he told us this. They didn't know each other. They weren't in prison at the same time as each other.
Right.
But they were in at the same time. Because obviously he was in for 24 years.
Yeah. So they might have been in for a few years here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the 31st of August 2015, the inquest began. Jeffrey Hunt still denied even knowing Lucille, and during the course of the inquest, Lucille's younger brother John said that they had to listen to the witnesses who had been in prison with Hunt. One of them said that Hunt had said to him, you pick up a girl at the bus stop, then to dispose of the body you cut them open and put a brick in it and they sink in the water. It was too much for John, because John Fitzgerald was there, and he was in a wheelchair and he just had to be wheeled out of the courtroom sobbing. No, that was his girlfriend at the time. I think they were, planning on
getting married.
I think they were like unofficially engaged, so
yeah,
it's awful. Even all these years later, it was.
Oh,
it was how good that he was still there though.
I know, but he thinks of probably what might have been. That's probably that's probably what upsets him is what might have been, and obviously that was potentially love of his life at that point.
Yeah. So on the 2nd of May 2016, Coroner Simon Cooper delivered his findings that Jeffrey Hunt had killed Lucille. He accepted Hunt's confession from 1976, but that didn't mean that he'd be charged and sent for trial automatically. That decision rested with Tasmania's Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Darrell Coates.
Because he has no orb then.
No, it's no orb. So he called he called James and John Butterworth, Lucille's brothers, in for a meeting. He told them that Jeffrey Hunt would not be criminally charged. Mr. Coates said, I have also concluded on the relevant and admissible evidence there is no reasonable prospect of convicting anybody with Miss Butterworth's death. So basically, everyone knows that Jeffrey Hunt killed Lucille, but there's not enough evidence to lay charges.
So he's walking around free?
Mm-hmm. So Lucille's older brother James died on the 18th of April 2019.
Oh.
And her younger brother John said that the family will never give up the search for Lucille's body. So they know who done it.
And he's walking around.
Yeah. If they just took his confession back in 1976 and he got punished for it, he might have confessed to what he'd done with her body.
Well, might have done, yeah.
Her body could have been found, but obviously, as you said, which I think is the case, that he's spent 24 years in prison.
Yeah.
And he's came out and he's like, I'm not going back in there.
No, exactly. I'm not going back in there. I've done 24 years. I don't want to spend any more time. As I said, at the time when he originally confessed, as I said, he probably thought, well, I'm going to prison for this murder anyway, so...
Yeah, I might as well just,
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now that, 24 years later, he's had time to think about it and time's passed, and of course he's got a bit of freedom, and he probably doesn't want to let go of that freedom. So I kind of understand why he probably did then deny it.
Well, he'll have been free for quite a while, because he spent 24 years in jail, but it wasn't until 2010.
Oh yeah.
So he's
probably built a life
for a long time. Yeah, he's probably built his life up again.
Yeah, and doesn't want to lose that. So I totally, as much as it's completely wrong, but I understand from his perspective why he's not going to confess to that this time, because why would you? I wouldn't.
But that orb, like, why he was so focused on the fact that it was that other guy.
But I thought, being a police officer, you have to allow yourself to consider every possibility. Like, even if maybe you do think that it's one way, until you've got the concrete evidence, because I can understand if you had the concrete evidence, then yeah, you focus solely on that one person, because you've got the evidence to back it up. But clearly he didn't have the evidence to back it up. So then you have to open your eyes to every other possibilities and every other leads that you get. And
do your job properly.
Exactly, and pursue them. I mean,
that's what a police officer's job is. You don't just go, because this person has done that before, we're going to go for him. That's him that done it. Actually do police work, investigate.
Well, yeah, that's it. You've got to investigate all possibilities, because...
And to actually have somebody confess to it and not take that seriously and not accept that confession, I mean, you don't have to automatically accept a confession, but if somebody has confessed, surely you have to investigate that.
Well, yeah, because that's it. I mean, if he's confessed in the police room, that doesn't mean, right, off to jail you go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got to go, right, okay, let's go and see where he was that night, the car that he drives, was there any witnesses, etc., etc. Because if that witness that came forward said they'd seen the car, oh, he does drive that car, he's confessed, that's, you know, so to me that's ridiculous. That really is, and what a shame for poor Lucille and her poor family.
I know. I reckon he's put her in the water though. Yeah. Because he said that when he confessed, he said he put her at the side of the river. Mm-hmm. So unless the river,
because that's what I mean. If he'd said the side of the river, then I would have thought that's maybe. I know, but like many years later, but that's where you'd investigate it. You dug up maybe.
But then the water could, they could have heavy rainfall, and the water could rise, and it could take her body into the water.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
So there could be reasons like that. Yeah. But like I reckon she's somehow either he's put her in the water or she's got into the water because they have done digs where he said her body was and stuff and not found her remains. So I think that's maybe what's happened.
That's awful.
I know, but that's how annoying is that case. Like how it's just absolutely ridiculous. It really is.
I know, like, you know,
that is a massive failure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, you again, you know, because I don't work in the police, I don't know how they work, and I know that, you know, sometimes they obviously make mistakes, they don't get things quite right. We're all human, you know. Even the police are human, so you know, things can go wrong in investigations and stuff. But to me, that was of their own doing that time. You know, that wasn't like them just getting something wrong by accident. That was like a guy that just did not want to see any other person in the frame for that except this guy.
It makes you wonder. I mean, like, I don't know. I maybe should have actually looked more into it, but I just wonder because the guy that he was accusing was an ex-policeman. So I was just wondering if he had any connections to him. Like if he maybe had a personal vendetta against him or something like that. Could have been.
Potentially.
Or he might not have known him personally, but just thought, well, he used to be a policeman, he used to be one of us.
Yeah, so I want to get him.
He's turned into a... Oh, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that you know, sadly a girl lost her life and her family never got the justice.
Well, her little brother's still alive, so I would love for him.
The chance of them finding her remains now, I think, are
probably not. But you know, I mean, the guy who killed her is still alive. I don't know actually if he is. I didn't actually look. But well, you don't know why they're still alive. You never know. I would love for them to find, you know, get some answers and get some closure, but
who knows? It's
probably not.
No, let's say when it's been such a long time, the chances are very slim. I mean, they did well getting sort of a bit further forward of it.
Yeah, I mean,
years later.
Yeah, I mean, they do know who done it, but like for that person to go unpunished must be heartbreaking for the family. I don't know if that's worse.
Like just actually knowing that the person that's done it and knowing that they're walking the streets and not being punished for it. Then that must be quite tough to take.
Anyway, and we're just sharp now.
I know, because we could ramble on forever.
Yeah, I know, we just go round and round circles. Okay. So thank you to everybody for listening. If you would like to join our Patreon, go head on over to patreon.com/CrimeDivers and you get bonus episodes and whatnot. You get a free pen, free mug. Just go and have a look.
Yeah, go and check us out.
Yeah, and if you want to follow us on social media, we'll put our details in the show notes.
And if you want to carry on listening to us and you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. Thanks for listening.
Bye.